For years, we've lived with this glaring paradox in the world of decentralized finance. I mean, you can execute a multi-million-dollar trade of tokenized U.S. Treasuries at like 3 in the morning on a Saturday.
Right, right.
The transaction settles instantly on a public ledger, cryptographic proof is generated, and the asset is unequivocally yours. But the second you try to actually redeem that digital asset for usable fiat cash to fund operations or, meet margin calls, you just hit a brick wall.
Yeah, a massive brick wall.
You're forced to wait until Monday morning when the traditional banking system decides to, well, basically turn the lights back on and process the queue.
Exactly. I mean, the blockchain never sleeps, but the global banking infrastructure very much still operates on a rigid, almost analog schedule.
It's like a post office that closes at 5 p.m. on a Friday, while the blockchain is an always-on internet.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that friction point, the exact intersection where on-chain digital assets meet off-chain fiat currency, has easily been the single biggest bottleneck for institutional adoption. We have effectively built a hyper-efficient digital highway that abruptly ends at a toll booth operated by someone using a fax machine.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today, our mission for this deep dive is to explore a massive milestone that is finally demolishing that toll booth.
Yes, and it's about time.
We're looking at a landmark pilot project from May 6, 2026. This involves an unprecedented collaboration between Ondo Finance, Kinexys by JP Morgan, Mastercard, and Ripple.
A really heavyweight lineup.
Oh, absolutely. And together, they successfully executed the first near real-time cross-border fiat redemption of a tokenized U.S. Treasury fund, triggered directly by a public blockchain.
Which is huge.
But to appreciate the magnitude of this, I mean, have you ever felt the frustration of waiting until Monday for a simple funds transfer to clear, just sitting there checking your account?
Oh, constantly. Everyone has.
Right, so imagine that frustration, but with millions of dollars of institutional capital. To really get why this pilot is revolutionary, we first need to look under the hood of the legacy financial system.
Yeah, this raises an important question. Why is that fiat off-ramp so universally sluggish?
Right, why does it take days?
To answer that, you have to look at how traditional wire systems and correspondent banking actually function. The legacy infrastructure relies on a series of completely siloed proprietary databases.
So they aren't actually talking to each other directly.
Not at all. When a massive institution moves fiat currency across borders, the money rarely travels directly from Bank A to Bank B. It has to hop through a whole network of intermediary banks.
These are the correspondent banks, right? The ones maintaining Nostro and Vostro accounts for each other just to facilitate these international hops.
Yes, exactly. And at every single stop along that route, a separate database has to be updated. Compliance checks have to be run locally. Liquidity has to be verified.
Sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It is. And fundamentally, these systems operate on batch processing. They collect a massive queue of transactions and process them at specific intervals during business hours.
So it's not real time at all?
No, not even close. If you initiate a transfer that requires a hop through a correspondent bank in London and is past their daily cutoff time, your capital just sits there, trapped in digital limbo until the next business day.
Wait, I need to stop you there and push back slightly. Is the core issue here really a lack of speed, or is it the lack of synchronization between two totally different financial languages, like crypto and traditional fiat?
That's a great distinction.
Because wire systems can be fast, right? They just choose to pause for manual anti-money laundering checks, sanction screening, and risk management. Are we blaming technology for what is essentially a massive regulatory bottleneck?
You're hitting on a crucial tension, but the two are completely intertwined. The regulatory requirements are rigorous, sure, but the legacy technology dictates a defensive, disjointed compliance posture.
Ah, I see, because they don't share the same data.
Exactly. Because Bank A and Bank B don't share a single source of truth, Bank B has to pause the transaction, independently verify the data, check the sanctions list, and wait for confirmation. It's a slow, sequential process.
Right, whereas a blockchain is simultaneous.
Precisely. Contrast that legacy system with a public blockchain, which operates with instant finality and a shared, transparent ledger. The core issue is that you have a public blockchain trying to interface with traditional bank ledgers that operate on deferred batch processing.
So you have instant cryptographic certainty crashing into a system based on deferred trust networks. Getting those two entirely different architectural paradigms to talk to each other without human intervention is, Well, it's an engineering nightmare.
It really is.
Think of the traditional banking system like a legacy train network. Every time you cross a national border, you have to unload the cargo, inspect it manually, and load it onto a train that runs on a completely different gauge of track.
That's a brilliant analogy.
What this pilot essentially built is a smart cargo container that can seamlessly glide from that legacy train track right onto a digital blockchain highway without ever slowing down for inspection.
Because the trust and compliance are baked into the container itself.
Exactly.
And that structural disconnect is exactly why institutions have been hesitant to fully embrace tokenized real-world assets. Over the last few years, the tokenization of assets like U.S. Treasuries has exploded.
Oh, totally. I mean, the yields are incredibly attractive.
Institutions love the yield,
Yeah.
and they love the collateral utility within DeFi ecosystems. But from a capital efficiency standpoint, it creates massive risk.
How so?
Well, imagine a geopolitical event happens globally over the weekend, and a multinational firm needs immediate fiat liquidity. Holding millions of dollars in tokenized treasuries is basically useless if they can't bridge that value into a traditional bank account to actually deploy it.
Right, they're cash poor but asset rich in a system that won't let them convert.
Exactly.
So we have the problem clearly defined. Capital trapped on weekends and holidays because of an inability to bridge instant on-chain assets with batched off-chain fiat.
Yep, that's the core of it.
Fixing that isn't just about making a blockchain run faster. It's about crossing the chasm into the highly regulated fiat world. So let's dig into exactly how Ripple actually got those digital tokens to show up as usable cash in a traditional bank account in Singapore.
This is the really impressive part.
Seeing how they pulled this off step by step is where the true innovation lies. So the asset in question here is Ondo's short-term U.S. government treasuries, known by the ticker OUSG, right?
Correct. And Ripple held a portion of these tokenized treasuries on the XRP Ledger, which is a decentralized public blockchain.
Okay, so walk us through the mechanics.
Step one begins when Ripple decides they need fiat liquidity. They initiate a redemption of their OUSD tokens. They execute this command via a smart contract on the XRP Ledger.
And how fast does that actually happen?
The asset leg of this transaction, meaning the actual movement, verification, and burning of the tokens on the decentralized network, was processed and reached absolute finality in under 5 seconds.
Wow, wait, really? Under 5 seconds to irrevocably process an institutional-grade treasury redemption?
Yes, that is the sheer speed of the digital language.
But then comes the hard part, right? The tokens have been burned on the ledger, representing a claim on the underlying asset, but now the actual U.S. dollars need to be delivered to Ripple's corporate bank account.
Exactly. This is where the orchestration becomes highly complex. Ondo Finance processes that verified blockchain redemption and must now initiate a fiat payout.
Which usually means jumping back into that clunky legacy system.
In the old world, yes. Ondo would have a human or an automated script log into a banking portal and initiate a standard SWIFT wire transfer. They just toss the transaction into that slow, batched correspondent banking queue we discussed earlier.
Right, waiting for the train to get unloaded.
But in this pilot, they did something entirely different. They routed the instruction through the Mastercard multi-token network, or the MTN.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How does the Mastercard MTN actually function in this flow?
Think of it like a bridge.
Yeah, think of the MTN not just as a payment network, but as a real-time, institutional-grade API gateway. It acts as a flawless universal translator between the blockchain and the bank.
A universal translator is the perfect way to describe it.
When the smart contract on the XRP Ledger registers that the OUSG token has been burned, the MTN instantly reads that cryptographic proof.
Right.
It takes that verified state change from the public ledger and translates it into a secure, standardized financial instruction, likely something like an ISO 2022 message, that the traditional banking world is actually programmed to understand and execute.
What's fascinating here is how that translation fundamentally solves the trust deficit. Legacy banks do not want to directly monitor public blockchains or ingest raw smart contract data.
No, the compliance risk is way too high for them.
Exactly. The MTN sits in the middle, it ingests the public blockchain data, and wraps it in the institutional trust and security framework of Mastercard. The MTN then routes that sanitized, trusted instruction directly to Kinexys by JP Morgan.
And for those who might not be following JP Morgan's internal tech stack closely, Kinexys is the evolution of their Onyx platform, right?
That's right.
It's their proprietary blockchain infrastructure designed specifically for commercial banking and institutional asset movement. So Kinexys receives this perfectly translated, trusted instruction from Mastercard. What happens inside the bank at that point?
Well, Kinexys instantly debits Ondo's blockchain deposit account.
A blockchain deposit account.
Yes, it's essentially a digital twin of fiat currency sitting on JP Morgan's internal ledger. It is real US dollars, but represented in a format that can interact seamlessly with smart contract logic.
Oh, wow. That's clever.
Once that internal account is debited, Kinexys uses its vast global correspondent banking network to settle the physical US dollar proceeds directly into Ripple's actual traditional bank account, all the way in Singapore.
Across the world. I mean, we are talking about moving from a decentralized public blockchain through a global payments oracle into a private banking ledger, and finally settling into a legacy bank account in a completely different regulatory jurisdiction.
All in one fluid motion.
And all of this is triggered almost instantly.
The real breakthrough of this pilot is that these were not completely separate systems sending isolated messages and hoping a back-office reconciliation team matched them up later in the day.
Right, no manual reconciliation needed.
Exactly. The blockchain execution and the traditional bank settlement operated in absolute concert. It was a single, integrated flow. The cryptographic action on the public blockchain mathematically triggered the fiat settlement in the traditional infrastructure.
That seamless integration is staggering, especially when you consider the institutional paranoia surrounding public blockchains.
Oh, the paranoia is very real.
Raj Damodaran, the executive vice president of blockchain and digital assets at Mastercard, nailed the core issue here. He pointed out that as tokenized assets gain real momentum, institutions don't just need speed. They need absolute certainty.
Certainty is everything for them.
He noted that the Mastercard MTN is bringing coordination, trust, and interoperability to institutional on-chain flows.
Coordination, trust, and interoperability. Without trust, global Tier 1 banks will completely quarantine themselves from a public blockchain.
They won't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
And without interoperability, the assets remain trapped in their digital silos, useful only for niche DeFi applications.
Right.
What this consortium proved is that you can have all three, bridging the gap safely without sacrificing the speed of the blockchain or the compliance rigor of the bank.
Okay, so understanding the mechanics, how the XRP Ledger burned the token, how Mastercard's API translated the proof, and how JP Morgan's Kinexys executed the fiat settlement shows us the technical reality of the plumbing.
The actual nuts and bolts.
Right. We see the cargo containers smoothly moving from the digital highway to the legacy train tracks. But the true impact, the reason we are dedicating a deep dive to this specific cross-industry pilot, is what this unified flow unlocks for the future of global markets.
We are talking about what many treasury managers and institutional investors consider the holy grail of global finance.
The holy grail. Let's really dig into the implications of that term. Because this wasn't just a controlled domestic transfer between two accounts at the same bank.
No, not at all.
This was a cross-border transaction, navigating the regulatory regimes of both the United States and Singapore. It was a cross-bank transaction. And most importantly, it successfully moved massive value completely outside of traditional banking windows.
Ian DeBode, the president of Ondo Finance, captured the gravity of this when he said, "This milestone is laying the groundwork for 247 global markets that never close."
A market that never closes.
Think deeply about the magnitude of that. For the entire history of modern finance, the rhythm of global business, trade, and liquidity has been artificially dictated by the opening and closing bills of exchanges and the rigid operating hours of central banks.
It's almost crazy when you say it out loud.
It is. If you needed to settle a massive, multi-million-dollar institutional trade on a Friday night to capitalize on a market dislocation in Asia, you simply couldn't do it.
You were just stuck.
You took on the counterparty risk, the currency risk, and the market risk of whatever might happen over the weekend before that trade finally processed on Monday or Tuesday.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Whether you're in corporate finance or just watching the global economy evolve, it means we're fundamentally dismantling the siloed infrastructures that hold corporate capital hostage.
Absolutely.
But it also reveals a hard truth about the future of finance. No single technology company or legacy bank can build this new paradigm alone.
That's a huge point.
Zach Chestnut, the global head of commercialization at Kinexys by JP Morgan, highlighted this exact dynamic. He pointed out that wholesale cross-industry collaboration is mandatory to see widespread adoption at an institutional scale.
You can't just build a walled garden anymore.
Exactly. You need the public ledger, the tokenization platform, the global payments network, and the Tier 1 banking infrastructure, all acting in perfect concert.
This represents a massive shift away from the early crypto ethos of disrupt and replace the banks.
Oh, yeah, the whole banks are obsolete narrative.
Right. This is not a winner-takes-all scenario where a single decentralized network usurps the traditional banking sector. It is a synthesis.
A true partnership.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the architecture framework they engineered for this pilot is not a fragile, hard-coded tech demo that only works for Ripple and Ondo.
It's not just a one-off PR stunt.
No, it was explicitly designed to be a repeatable, highly scalable framework. It can theoretically support instant fiat redemptions from any public blockchain, where Ondo's tokenized treasuries are issued, provided the compliance layers are met.
That is the crucial takeaway right there. It is essentially a plug-and-play API for institutional liquidity. Marcus Infanger, the senior vice president of RippleX, emphasized this by noting that while the XRP Ledger enables the low-latency asset movement, the true compounding value is only unlocked when that ledger is paired with global banking infrastructure.
They've effectively proven that tokenized commerce can operate safely and instantaneously at a true institutional scale.
I mean, just imagine you're running the Treasury Department for a massive multinational corporation. It's midnight on a Saturday.
The absolute worst time for a financial emergency.
Exactly. A sudden supply chain crisis arises on the other side of the planet, requiring an immediate injection of capital to secure materials. Or maybe a sudden distressed asset becomes available at a steep discount. Under the legacy system, your hands are completely tied.
Your capital is asleep in a bank ledger, totally inaccessible until Monday morning.
But under this new unified framework, you could liquidate millions of dollars in tokenized treasury assets that were earning yield just moments prior on a public blockchain.
And it happens instantly.
Right. Through this seamless network of the MTN and Kinexys, you have that hard fiat currency settled in a correspondent bank account in Singapore or London or Tokyo in near real time. We are talking about seconds or minutes, not days.
The sheer capital efficiency and operational agility that unlocks for global commerce is staggering.
It really is.
It alters the fundamental definition of corporate liquidity. When capital can flow freely across borders, across currencies, and across time zones without friction, businesses can operate with significantly leaner balance sheets.
Because they don't have to stockpile cash just in case.
Exactly. They do not have to hoard idle cash to manage weekend settlement risks. They can react to global events instantly. The friction of the legacy correspondent banking system is essentially a massive, hidden tax on global commerce.
A tax everyone just accepted because there was no alternative.
Right. And this pilot serves as the definitive blueprint for eliminating that tax entirely.
We're literally watching the underlying plumbing of the global financial system being upgraded in real time. It's like replacing a sprawling network of rusty, leaky pipes that rely on manual valves with an automated, instantaneous teleportation grid.
And achieving that technological leap while strictly maintaining the rigorous compliance, anti-money laundering, and security standards that heavily regulated global institutions like JP Morgan and Mastercard demand.
That's the real magic trick.
Navigating that delicate balancing act between decentralized speed and centralized compliance is the true triumph of what they engineered here.
So let's take a step back and recap the immense ground we've covered today. We started by examining the frustrating reality of the legacy financial system, a system constrained by manual correspondent banking, fragmented Nostro and Vostro databases, and arbitrary operating hours,
which created a massive liquidity bottleneck.
Right. We explored how the exponential rise of tokenized real-world assets on 247 public blockchains created an inherent tension. That clash between the instantaneous digital world and the deferred processing of the traditional banking sector.
We then dissected the mechanics of the solution. We traced how Ondo Finance, Kinexys by JP Morgan, Mastercard, and Ripple collaborated to shatter those boundaries.
They successfully executed the first near real-time, cross-border tokenized treasury redemption.
We saw the XRP Ledger process the digital asset burn in under 5 seconds. Then Mastercard's multi-token network instantly translated that cryptographic proof into a trusted fiat instruction.
And finally, JP Morgan's Kinexys debited an internal ledger to settle the fiat currency across the world in Singapore.
They successfully proved that decentralized public blockchains and highly regulated legacy interbank rails can function smoothly as a single unified settlement system.
They have, for all intents and purposes, found the holy grail of global institutional finance.
It is a systemic milestone. Historians of finance will likely look back upon this as the definitive turning point in how institutional money moves around the globe.
It marks the moment the digital and traditional worlds finally synchronized.
It changes the entire paradigm of capital flow.
Which leads me to a final thought for you to chew on as we wrap up. We talked at the beginning about that frustrating feeling of staring at the locked doors of the financial system on a Friday evening.
Oh, yeah.
But if tokenized assets and fiat currency can now move instantaneously, seamlessly translating back and forth between public blockchains and global banks at any hour of any day, what happens to the very concept of the financial weekend?
That's a wild thought.
What happens to the market close? If the underlying plumbing of global finance never sleeps, will the concept of business hours eventually become entirely obsolete in our global economy?
I mean, the idea of money having business hours is rapidly becoming an anachronism. It's a fascinating structural shift, and one that is becoming less theoretical and more practical by the day.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you walk away with a much clearer understanding of the complex mechanics driving how the financial world is evolving beneath our feet. Until next time, keep questioning how the systems around you actually work.
Thank you for joining the discussion. Goodbye.